What are you hiding from me?
I'm not hiding anything.
It had been almost a year since I last saw her. Not since that unforgettable night when she walked out, suitcase in hand, her face as dry as desert dust. No tears, no goodbye that mattered, no explanation worth holding on to, just a clipped, I need to figure things out, and then a door slamming that felt more permanent than anything else. That was the last frame burned into my mind. But fate has a cruel sense of humor, because here we were again. My cousin Mark's wedding. A big family gathering, the kind of event where you can't just fade into the background no matter how much you want to. The venue was a vineyard, picture perfect, every detail curated like a magazine spread. Mason jar centerpieces lined the tables, and string lights hung above us, twinkling like fireflies caught in a web of summer air. I almost didn't go. I told myself I didn't owe anyone my presence, didn't need to prove anything to anyone, didn't feel like fielding endless questions about her. Where's Chloe? You two still going strong? She's amazing, man. Don't mess it up. They all meant well, but every word felt like salt in a wound I couldn't quite close. For a while, I even believed the lie I told myself, that I was the one who ruined it. Still, I showed up. Not to stir drama, not to win anyone over, just to be there. For Mark, for my family, maybe even for myself. I pulled on a charcoal gray suit, something neat but understated, ran a comb through my hair with more care than usual, and told myself I was steady. But then I saw her, and every piece of composure I'd rehearsed cracked inside me. She walked into the room like she hadn't left scorched earth behind her. Like she hadn't disappeared without warning from the life we built together. Her stride was the same as always, confident, graceful, impossible to ignore. Her auburn hair caught the light the way it used to when she leaned over my shoulder on late nights. Her laugh drifted across the room, that sound that once meant safety, belonging, home. She wore a pale blue dress, her color, and around her neck rested a silver chain I'd given her 2 Christmases ago. And beside her, there was someone new. A man, not flashy but well-kept, the type who probably had Yelp bookmarked for every best brunch spot in the city. I couldn't tell what he was to her, boyfriend, friend, placeholder, but the way she held his arm told me she wanted the world to see. Wanted me to see. I didn't react. At least not outwardly. Inside, though, my stomach twisted in that same ugly way it used to when I caught her smiling at her phone and she swore it was just a friend. The room buzzed with small talk, hugs, polite cheek kisses, empty compliments that sounded rehearsed. You look amazing. So good to see you. I floated on the edges of it all, watching more than engaging. And then it happened. Chloe's eyes found mine. She froze for a second, then pasted on a soft smile, the kind you'd flash a stranger on an elevator, polite and disposable. She approached, still clinging to Mr. Brunch's arm. Hey, she chirped, her voice just a little too bright. Wow, you look good. I nodded, keeping my voice even. Thanks. You too. She tilted her head toward him. This is Daniel. Then she hesitated, the faintest pause before finishing. And Daniel, this is, she smiled again, but it wasn't the smile I knew. This is my friend, Ethan. My friend? Now, I'm not the guy who flips tables at weddings or makes scenes in front of a crowd. But in that instant, something inside me cracked wide open. We'd shared nights of whispered futures, exchanged keys, decorated an apartment, dreamed out loud, and she erased all of it with one word. Friend. It wasn't just the label, it was the tone. Like we were seatmates on a flight years ago, nothing more. I studied her, then Daniel. He gave me a polite nod, extending his hand like none of this was complicated. I shook it. "Nice to meet you, Daniel," I said smoothly. Then I turned to Chloe and let the truth land. "I'm Ethan, Chloe's ex." I caught the flicker across her face, the one she tried to bury beneath that polished smile. Daniel blinked, glancing between us, confusion settling in. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was sharp, electric. I let a smile touch my lips, then excused myself, walking away before anyone could pin me with questions. Outside, I found a quiet corner by the vineyard's fence, leaning against the worn wood while the cool air washed over me. I wasn't trying to cut her down, not really. But I also wasn't going to let her erase me from our story like I'd never mattered. We weren't friends. We were never just friends. We were almost forever. And that kind of bond doesn't just vanish because one person decides to pretend it never existed. Being edited out of someone's history is its own cruelty, like being told you were just a pit stop, a chapter they'd rather not reread. Maybe she thought calling me her a friend made things easier. Maybe Daniel didn't know the full story. Maybe saying X was too raw for her to choke out. But whatever the reason, standing there outside with the vines stretching out in front of me, I felt erased. Yet part of me understood. That's the twisted thing. Outwardly, we had both moved on. But healing doesn't follow a calendar, it's its own kind of arithmetic, one that never quite balances. I stayed out longer than I meant to, replaying every memory, every version of her, every version of us. I didn't feel bitter, just aware. Funny how you walk into an event like this expecting to fade into the backdrop, only to find yourself dragged back into chapters you thought you'd buried. As the sun dipped behind the hills, drenching the vineyard in amber light, I admitted something I hadn't dared say out loud in months. I still missed her. Not just her, the idea of us. And ideas, they don't fade nearly as fast as people do. When I finally stepped back inside, dinner was about to be served. The lights had dimmed, candles flickering across crisp white linens, silverware clinking to the rhythm of soft jazz covers. I found my assigned seat at table 5. Familiar names greeted me, cousins and family friends. But then I saw the empty card placed beside mine. Chloe. Of course. Mark's mom must have arranged the seating chart before Chloe vanished from my life, before we unraveled. No one had updated it. Or maybe they had, and Chloe insisted. She always liked steering the narrative, controlling the angles. She didn't sit beside me. She and Daniel claimed 2 chairs across the table instead, close enough that I could feel the tension, far enough to pretend it wasn't there. I caught her stealing glances at me, quick and assessing. I didn't flinch. Once, I even smiled, not bitter, not smug, just genuine. That rattled her more than any words could have. The first toast came from Mark's younger brother, voice trembling but heartfelt, laced with cliches that somehow worked because they were his. Everyone laughed, everyone clapped. Then Mark's father raised his glass. His words carried more weight, talking about love as a choice you make, not just on the big days but on the quiet Tuesdays. He launched into a story about Mark as a kid, sketching his future wife and promising he'd always make her laugh. That's when I saw Chloe again, not the polished version across from me, but the barefoot girl on our balcony 2 summers ago, drowning in my hoodie, sipping wine straight from the bottle while we laughed ourselves hoarse over bad Fleetwood Mac karaoke. That version of her felt like oxygen, and I found myself aching for it, wondering when she disappeared. Was it gradual, or did it happen all at once while I wasn't paying attention? A server topped off my glass. I kept it mostly full, afraid of what might slip out if I drowned too deep. Across the table, Chloe leaned into Daniel, whispering something that made him smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was a distance in him, in her. Not icy, just off. That's when I realized they weren't really together. Not like we were. Maybe not ever. Her posture betrayed her, shoulders stiff, laughter too loud at weak jokes, hands carefully kept from touching his. It wasn't romance. It was staging. And I was meant to be the audience. The night carried on, but inside me, it was far from easy. Every small clink of silverware, every laugh echoing through the air felt like it pressed harder on my chest. I thought I was holding steady, but then came the speeches. The maid of honor stood tall, radiant with joy, her voice trembling as she shared stories about Mark and his bride. And while the room swelled with warmth, I felt the heat of Chloe's presence across the table like a spotlight burning through me. Every sentence the maid spoke about love, commitment, and choosing each other daily felt like an arrow, sharp and deliberate. Each word cracked open memories I'd worked so hard to bury. When the best man stepped forward, full of jokes and nostalgia, I let myself breathe, even chuckle a little. But the reprieve was short-lived. His toast ended with a line about finding the one person you never want to let go of. Chloe shifted in her seat, her eyes darting toward me for half a heartbeat. It wasn't long, but it was enough. Enough to stir the storm inside me again. After the toasts, the lights dimmed further, and the music swelled as the couple shared their first dance. It was the kind of moment you see in movies, soft lighting, swaying bodies, eyes locked like nothing else existed. The crowd circled them, phones out, capturing forever in pixels. I watched, but not just them. Out of the corner of my eye, Chloe leaned closer to Daniel, but it felt wrong, forced. Her hand rested on his arm like she was told to place it there, like she needed to be seen. But her eyes, they weren't his. They wandered too often. They searched too much. And sometimes, they landed on me. I sipped my drink, steadying my breath. Inside, I wasn't angry anymore. Not like before. No, it was something heavier, an ache carved into me, sharp and unrelenting. I couldn't decide if I hated her for it or missed her for it, or maybe both. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to sit quietly in her shadow, not tonight. As the music shifted to a livelier beat, the dance floor filled with cousins, aunts, uncles, and friends. I tried to avoid it, to stay seated, but Mark wouldn't have it. "Come on, man," he shouted, tugging me into the swirl of bodies. I laughed, letting the beat carry me for a moment, but even then, I felt her gaze. Chloe, spinning half-heartedly with Daniel, her laughter pitched too high, her movements rehearsed. She caught my eyes mid-spin, and for that second, the world narrowed. Just her and me, two souls orbiting the same memory, pretending to be strangers in the crowd. When the song ended, I slipped away, heading back outside. The vineyard was washed in moonlight now, rows of vines stretching like shadows across the earth. I needed air, needed space. And that's when I heard footsteps behind me. "Ethan," her voice called softly. I froze. I hadn't prepared for this. Slowly, I turned. There she was, framed by the glow of the lanterns, her dress catching the faint light, her expression unreadable. "Hey," she whispered. I nodded. "Hey." For a moment, silence. Just the sound of the crickets, the distant music, and my heart pounding harder than it should. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said finally. I chuckled, bitter but quiet. "It's my cousin's wedding." Where else would I be? She flinched slightly, like the edge in my voice cut sharper than she thought it would. She looked down, then back up. You look good. Thanks. You already said that. Her lips parted, but no words came. She fidgeted with the chain at her neck, the one I'd given her. My chest tightened at the sight. Why'd you call me your friend? I asked, voice low but firm. Her eyes widened, caught. She swallowed hard, searching for words. I didn't know what else to say. It felt easier. Easier for who? I pressed. For you? For Daniel? Or for me, standing there like I was just some guy you bumped into once at a coffee shop? Her eyes glossed over, but no tears fell. I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it, Chloe? Because from where I'm standing, it sure sounded like you were erasing me. She took a step closer, but not too close. Her voice dropped, softer, more fragile. I didn't know how to handle it. Seeing you. Being here. Having him there. I panicked. I shook my head, exhaling hard. We weren't friends. We were more than that. We were everything once. And you can't just rewrite that chapter like it never happened. Her face broke then, not in sobs, but in cracks. The kind that showed truth slipping through. I know, she whispered. I know what we were. I thought pretending would make it easier to survive tonight. I stared at her, studying every flicker of regret, every shadow of the woman I once knew. And for the first time, I realized something that both hurt and healed me all at once. You still miss it too, don't you? Her breath caught, but she didn't answer. She didn't need to. Silence can be louder than words. The music swelled inside, laughter spilling out of the hall. Someone called her name in the distance. She glanced back, then at me again. For a second, it was just us, standing in the middle of what could have been, knowing it was gone but still feeling it burn. I should go, she said softly. I nodded. Yeah. She turned, walking back toward the lights, toward the man who wasn't me, toward the version of life she'd chosen. And I stayed, rooted in the shadows, watching until she disappeared into the crowd. That night, I didn't chase her. I didn't break. I just stood there, letting the ache settle where it belonged, in the past. Because maybe that's the cruelest truth of love. Sometimes it doesn't end with fire or betrayal. Sometimes it ends with silence, with a single word like friend, and the quiet realization that the story you once lived is now just a chapter closed. And in that silence, I found something I hadn't expected. Not closure, not yet. But the first step toward it. A step I had to take alone. The reception carried on, voices rising, glasses clinking, laughter spilling into the night. But I stayed outside, leaning against the cool stone wall, my chest heavy but steady. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like running. I didn't feel like screaming. I just let it all wash over me, the regret, the longing, the quiet kind of grief that comes when you realize some things are never coming back. Eventually, I walked back inside. Mark spotted me and pulled me into another hug, his face glowing with joy. I smiled, meant it even, because none of this was his fault. His happiness was pure, untouched by the mess that still lingered between Chloe and me. And I couldn't let my storm cloud his sunshine. The rest of the evening blurred. Speeches gave way to more dancing, more laughter, more of the kind of love that fills a room until it spills out the doors. I sat at my table, watching people I loved celebrate, and I reminded myself that life doesn't pause for heartbreak. It never has, and it never will. Chloe stayed on the other side of the room most of the night. Daniel's arm draped over her shoulders, his smile easy, his steps confident. She played her part well, smiling, laughing, holding his hand like the future belonged to them. Maybe it did. But every now and then, her eyes drifted. Not for long, not enough for anyone else to notice. But I noticed. And every time they did, it was like a silent confession hanging in the air between us. Near the end of the night, when the cake was cut and the sparklers handed out, I caught one last glimpse of her across the courtyard. The light flickered against her face, soft and haunting. She looked right at me, no disguises, no polite smiles. Just raw, unspoken truth. Then, in a blink, it was gone. She turned back to Daniel, holding his hand as they disappeared into the sea of glowing sparks. I stood there, sparkler in hand, and let the moment settle deep in me. That was it. No grand farewell, no dramatic confrontation. Just a look. A single, fleeting look that carried years of love, loss, and everything in between. When the night finally ended, I drove home under a sky thick with stars. The road stretched endless, but for once, I didn't dread it. My chest still ached, yes, but it beat steady. Strong. Alive. I thought about the word she'd used, friend. How small it sounded, how empty. And yet, maybe there was something in it I hadn't seen before. Maybe it wasn't erasure. Maybe it was her way of giving me space, her way of keeping us from breaking completely in front of a room full of people. Maybe, in her own fractured way, it was kindness. Or maybe it was just cowardice. Maybe I'd never really know. But as the miles rolled by, I realized it didn't matter. What mattered was that I still had my story. The chapters we wrote together, messy and beautiful, couldn't be unwritten. And maybe that was enough. Not to heal me, not yet, but to remind me that what we had was real. That I wasn't crazy to have believed in it. That love, even when it ends, leaves its mark. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the first hints of dawn were breaking. I killed the engine, sat in the silence, and let the stillness wrap around me. For once, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't scroll through old photos. I didn't draft unsent messages I'd never send. I just sat there, breathing, existing, letting the night go. And as I finally stepped inside, closing the door behind me, I whispered a truth into the empty room, one meant only for me. We were never just friends. The words didn't sting like I thought they would. They felt honest. Final. Like setting down a weight I'd carried too long. And that's how the night ended. Not with fireworks, not with rage, not even with tears. Just with me, standing at the edge of something new, carrying the pieces of a love that had shaped me, hurt me, and in some strange way, made me stronger. Because life doesn't always give us the endings we want. Sometimes, it gives us the ending we need, the one that forces us to move forward, even when we're not ready. And maybe, just maybe, that's its own kind of grace.